This is the story of two vastly different realities existing in the exact same week. In London, a future king signed a £500 million initiative to reshape the British landscape, quietly cementing a legacy of tangible power. Thousands of miles away in a sparsely populated auditorium in Geneva, a duchess stood before a microphone, clutching at the grief of strangers to sustain a fading illusion of global relevance. What looked like a simple scheduling coincidence was actually a devastating metaphor for the final collapse of the Sussex Empire. In the next few minutes, we are going to unpack the quiet, forensic destruction of Harry and Meghan's commercial machine. This is not a story about petty family gossip. This is a masterclass in psychological warfare public relations and the staggering moral contradiction of a couple who weaponized victimhood, only to find themselves completely outmaneuvered by an institution that simply refused to play their game. We will examine what happened in Geneva, the subtle social media signals that carry devastating deeper meaning, and why Prince William's latest maneuver represents the point of no return for his brother. To understand the sheer magnitude of this fall from grace, we must briefly look back at the empire they thought they were building. When Harry and Meghan stepped away from the British monarchy, they did not leave to live a quiet life of obscurity. They launched themselves into the American aristocracy with unprecedented velocity, armed with a $100 million Netflix contract, prestigious Spotify deals, and the world's undivided attention. They were positioned to become the ultimate modern power couple. They were untouchable. They traded the constraints of the palace for the limitless sky of Hollywood. The narrative was perfect. The exiled prince and his brilliant wife, building a humanitarian and commercial juggernaut driven by compassion. But compassion, as it turns out, requires actual labor. Fast forward to the present, and the golden veneer has completely oxidized. The contrast between the working royals and the Montecito operation has never been more brutally apparent than it is right now. Consider the stark difference in output. Prince William has just initiated a massive liquidation of a fifth of the Duchy of Cornwall estate to inject £500 million into building socially and environmentally sustainable housing over the next decade. He is leveraging an ancient institution to enact modern, sweeping societal change. It is undeniable, quiet, and profoundly effective. He is putting his money where his mouth is, generating a blueprint that will outline his reign. Meanwhile, the Sussex camp continues to operate on the currency of announcements rather than execution. We are subjected to an endless cycle of press releases about upcoming Netflix adaptations, romantic dramas, and polo documentaries. Projects are announced with great fanfare to dilute negative headlines, but the actual return on investment is staggeringly hollow. When Harry and Meghan announced their adaptation of a popular romance novel, it languished in development hell. Meanwhile, rival studios like Amazon scooped up similar projects and pushed them straight to premiere within months. Hollywood is a brutal meritocracy. You cannot survive on royal titles alone when you are competing with aggressive, disciplined production houses. This lack of execution proves they are unwilling to put in the grueling, invisible hours required to build a true media empire. The Archwell production line appears to be paralyzed by a fundamental lack of discipline, creating an atmosphere of commercial desperation. This commercial desperation is severely compounded by the visual humiliation radiating from Europe. While Harry and Meghan struggle to generate authentic goodwill, the Princess of Wales recently undertook an international visit to northern Italy to advance her early years initiative. The imagery was flawless, the crowds were massive and genuinely overwhelmed to see her. She looked entirely at ease, studying groundbreaking educational theories and engaging with the public without a trace of artificiality. Her initiative is not a PR stunt. It is a meticulously researched, decades-long commitment to sociological data, building a framework for future generations. There was no desperate scrambling for the perfect camera angle. There was only the effortless, unbothered grace of a woman who understands her assignment and her power. For a couple obsessed with optics, watching Catherine command international adoration while simply doing her job must be an agonizing psychological blow. This brings us to the ethical collapse in Geneva. Desperate to reclaim the narrative of global thought leaders, Meghan flew to Switzerland to deliver a speech on the dangers of social media for children. On the surface, it sounds like a noble endeavor, but the public is no longer blinded by the rhetoric, and the moral contradiction was instantly exposed. This is a woman who just hours prior was using the digital footprint of her own children to generate engagement and distract from bad press. She dangles their privacy as a commodity. offering mere glimpses of the backs of their heads to keep the media hungry. Security experts warn that this specific tactic of baiting the public is inherently dangerous, inviting the very digital scrutiny she claims to be fighting against. But the true darkness of the Geneva appearance lies in the tactical weaponization of tragedy. To elevate her own profile, we watched her embrace the grieving parents of children who took their own lives due to cyberbullying. We saw the familiar calculated empathy. It is an incredibly uncomfortable pattern. We saw it when she arrived in Uvalde, Texas, with a camera crew after a devastating mass shooting. We see it whenever she needs a shield against criticism. Aligning oneself with the ultimate vulnerability of others is a deeply sinister public relations strategy when it is used to rehabilitate a shattered personal brand. It feels less like philanthropy and more like staggering exploitation. It is parachute empathy, dropping into a tragedy for a quick photo opportunity before flying back to a private estate. Compare this theatrical display of empathy with the reigning monarch. Following a horrific local tragedy in the UK involving knife violence, King Charles quietly traveled to meet the surviving victims and their families. He did not draft a self-indulgent essay for a fashion magazine. He did not bring a production team to capture his grief. He simply showed up, offered his presence, and allowed the focus to remain entirely on the victims. The royal family understands that true duty requires the erasure of the ego. Harry and Meghan's entire operation requires the constant, exhausting magnification of theirs. Their relentless need to center themselves is also driving the exhaustive narrative surrounding their security. They continue to paint King Charles as the cruel patriarch, denying them safety, attempting to villainize a man battling cancer on the global stage. Yet they happily jet off to Colombia, Nigeria, and Switzerland without a second thought. The security argument is not about actual physical safety. It is a theatrical prop designed to humiliate the monarchy and justify their perpetual victimhood. If they simply gave the standard 28 days notice to return to the UK, they would receive the protection they require, but a quiet, secure visit does not serve their narrative. They demand the privileges of the institution they spent years trying to burn to the ground, all while publicly attacking the man who funds it. But the public has grown numb to the outrage, and the media cycle is shifting from fascination to absolute fatigue. The tragedy tour is running out of destinations. The predictable leak of powerful speech headlines copied and pasted by lazy weekend journalists no longer translates to actual cultural influence. And now, the true cost of their isolation is beginning to manifest in the one arena Harry thought was entirely safe and completely his own. Behind the scenes, the Invictus Games, his singular, undisputed achievement, is showing signs of severe structural instability. High-level executives are walking away. Key board members are vanishing, long time. Sponsors are quietly re-evaluating their associations and stepping back from the table. The foundation is cracking, not because the palace launched a coordinated attack, but because the toxicity of the Sussex brand is finally bleeding into the things that once made them universally respected. And as the corporate and charitable worlds begin to carefully sever their ties, a devastating realization is settling over Montecito. The palace isn't trying to destroy them anymore. They have simply locked the gates, stepped back, and are watching them do it to themselves. The collapse of the Invictus Games infrastructure is not merely a professional setback for Prince Harry. It is a profound psychological amputation. Invictus was his bulletproof vest. It was the one untouchable sanctuary where his military background and his genuine capacity for compassion aligned to create something globally respected. Watching key executives resign and long-term sponsors quietly evaporate signifies a chilling reality. The Sussex toxicity has finally breached the last perimeter. When your closest advisors and corporate backers quietly excuse themselves from the room, it is the ultimate indictment of your leadership. It proves that the chaos is not an external media invention, but an internal operational reality. Inside the Montecito estate, the atmosphere must be suffocating. Imagine the psychological pressure cooker of relying on positive public perception for both your primary income and your fundamental self-worth, only to wake up day after day to global indifference or razor-sharp critique. The therapy speak they weaponized to explain their royal exit, relying heavily on buzzwords like trauma boundaries and healing now rings incredibly hollow. Their isolation is absolute. There are no frantic calls from London trying to negotiate a truce. There are no secret diplomatic missions to bring them back into the fold. The palace has employed the most devastating weapon in its historical arsenal, which is utter unbreakable silence. King Charles and Prince William are not plotting against them in dimly lit rooms. They have simply and permanently moved on. For a couple whose entire commercial brand was built on being the focal point of a royal feud, this institutional apathy is a death sentence. The Sussexes built a multi-million-dollar enterprise on the promise of spilling explosive family secrets, but they have effectively strip-mined their own trauma for Netflix documentaries, podcasts, and a globally televised memoir. The well of secrets is dry. The world knows the stories, the grievances, and the perceived slights. Because there is no new material, they are forced to either recycle old grudges or desperately attempt to pivot into new arenas where they have zero established authority. This is why we see these erratic, poorly planned appearances in spaces like international cyberbullying summits. They are desperately searching for a new cause to champion, a new stage to elevate them above the celebrity fray, but the public sees the machinery behind the curtain. Notice the subtle yet deeply significant shifts in their recent choreography. We are beginning to see a fracture in the perfectly unified front. There are more solo ventures and independent branding attempts that reveal a massive internal divide in their long-term strategy. Meghan's pivot back to lifestyle, influencing marked by the sudden and confusing launch of American Riviera Orchard, arrived with a jarring lack of polish and quickly faded into an echoing void. Sending a jar of branded jam to a handful of celebrity friends is not a masterstroke of commercial enterprise. It is the desperate action of a social media influencer struggling against a changing algorithm, not the behavior of an international duchess. The subtle signal here is profound. It demonstrates that they traded the global prestige of the British monarchy, an institution that literally shapes history for the fleeting transactional dopamine of Instagram mentions. This lifestyle pivot also highlights the devastating chasm between Harry and Meghan's natural habitats. Meghan is entirely comfortable retreating into the Hollywood ecosystem of product placements, brand alignments, and red carpet networking. It is the world she understands. But for Prince Harry, a man raised in palaces whose entire identity was tethered to national duty military service, and institutional weight being reduced to a silent +1 at minor celebrity events, is a catastrophic downgrade. The visual humiliation of him looking lost in VIP boxes or awkwardly standing on the periphery of his wife's networking attempts speaks volumes. He traded a life of guaranteed consequence for a life of commercial scrambling, and the realization of that trade-off appears to be etching itself across his face in every unposed photograph. This story continues to grip the public not because we are obsessed with petty gossip, but because it is a deeply resonant, modern Shakespearean tragedy played out in real time. It touches on universal human anxieties. It is a cautionary tale about the staggering danger of hubris, the illusion that immense wealth equates to absolute freedom, and the bitter realization that running away from your family does not cure your internal unrest. It forces viewers to examine the difference between chasing attention and building a legacy. We watch them not out of a simplistic desire to see them fail, but out of a dark forensic fascination with self-sabotage. We are witnessing what happens when someone burns down the only bridge that connects them to their true purpose, only to realize they are stranded on an island with no resources and no map. The weaponization of their royal titles while simultaneously attacking the institution that bestowed them is a moral contradiction the public simply cannot forgive. You cannot demand the security, the deference, and the global platform of a working royal while flatly refusing to do the unglamorous, repetitive work that justifies those privileges. The audience has recognized this transactional greed. They see the empty photo opportunities with vulnerable people. They see the desperate clinging to a status that was abandoned years ago, and they have collectively decided to stop buying the product. As we look forward, the contrast between the two royal households will only continue to sharpen into devastating relief. In the UK, Prince William will break ground on his sustainable housing initiative. He will pour millions into the earth, laying physical bricks that will shelter real families for generations to come. The Princess of Wales will continue to expand her early years research, quietly influencing public education policy and pediatric frameworks. Their legacy is entirely secured through quiet, unglamorous, and consistent execution. Their power is real because it produces tangible results for other people. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan will likely continue to chase the spotlight, scrambling to repackage their fading relevance for any audience or streaming platform still willing to pay the entry fee. But the golden era of their commercial dominance is definitively over. The world has stopped listening to the grievances and the media cycle has moved on. The illusion of their limitless power has finally broken, revealing the hollow, exhausting reality beneath. They won their ultimate freedom from the palace, but the true tragedy is that it cost them absolutely everything that made them matter. If you found this analysis insightful and appreciate this forensic approach to global public relations, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear your thoughts on the subtle signals we discussed today and what you think is next for the Sussex brand. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the psychological strategies shaping the global stage. Thank you for watching.